I rise in support of the amendment, which has been described by the proponent and opponent, obviously would strip from the Defense Authorization Bill a provision that authorizes funding for an alternate engine for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. Underscoring Senator Lieberman's point, as was the case with the provision this body addressed in the F-22 program, funding for an alternate engine for the JSF at this time is something that the Department of Defense has not asked for and does not want. It's not reflected in either the President's budget request or any of the service's unfunded priorities list. Madam President, I believe there's good reason why neither the Department or any of the services at this time want an alternate engine for the JSF. That reason is perhaps best expressed in the letter that Senator Lieberman has already quoted from and entered into the record from Secretary Gates, where he concludes by saying, "It is my belief that the Joint Strike Fighter program presented in the President's budget request is in the best interest of national security. If a final bill is presented to the President concerning provisions that would seriously disrupt the F-35 program, the President's senior advisors will recommend that the President veto the bill." And before I go much further, I'd like to apologize to all members who had planned to speak on this very important amendment that had arranged their schedules to do so, and we have obviously changed the timing despite a unanimous consent agreement to the contrary to apparently to accommodate one senator's schedule. And so I hope that, because this is a very important issue, that senators both in support of Senator Bayh's position and senators in support of this amendment would have to seize the opportunity to come down and address this issue. Some have cited the benefits of competition as a reason to pursue a second engine for the Joint Strike Fighter, but a competition for this engine was already conducted. It was already conducted as part of the original fly-off competition for the Joint Strike Fighter itself. And the current airframe manufacturer and engine team won. In 1996, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and McDonnell Douglas originally competed for the two Joint Advanced Strike Technology Concept Demonstration Awards. In connection with that down select, each of those airframe manufacturers solicited engine proposals from Pratt & Whitney and General Electric. Pratt & Whitney won the competition, as to Lockheed Martin and Boeing, and General Electric won separately. As to McDonnell Douglas, Lockheed Martin and Boeing were selected to proceed to concept demonstration, where Lockheed Martin ultimately won in 2001. That is exactly how most military aircraft engines are selected, as a team combining an airframe with a power plant. That makes sense, I might say. Obviously, we don't want them being developed separately. So with regard to a second engine, we're really not talking about competition. We're actually talking about another bite at the apple. I hope that the great engine war is over. I know of no data or analysis that supports that taxpayers will see any net savings from subjecting the engine for the JSF to any further competition. I don't believe that there's anybody who believes more in competition than the senator from Connecticut and me, including the chairman. We need to have competition. But there comes a point where you have to make a decision in the development of both the aircraft and the engine and move forward. And at some point, you have to abandon the alternate engine, or in some cases, there's been advocates of alternate aircraft itself to perform the same mission as in the case of the tanker, and to move forward in order to proceed in a fashion which is in the best interest of the taxpayers and the defense of the country. That's why the Secretary of Defense feels so strongly on this issue that he says that the President's senior advisors will recommend that the President veto the bill if the Lieberman amendment is not adopted. So the fact is also that funding an alternate engine over the next 6 years has been estimated to cost the program about $5 billion, the equivalent of 50 to 80 aircraft, according to the program manager. Also, given that continuing development of a second engine would require in excess of $600 million in fiscal year 2010 alone, according to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force. Paying for the engine in just a year would require cutting production of at least 2 Joint Strike Fighters this year alone. Now, there may be some non-financial benefits to subjecting the engine program for the Joint Strike Fighter to additional competition, improved contractor performance at the margins, for example. Like Senator Lieberman, I am not persuaded that those benefits are worth an additional cost of $5 billion to the Joint Strike Fighter's bottom line over the next 6 years.